Yeah, it's okay. Okay, so we are live. So hello everyone. This is Agile Mondays. Welcome. And my name is Olena Grinyuk, and every Monday I am hosting this Agile Mondays series. And I am joined and very glad to be joined for a third month already by John Mark Williams from Agile Business Consortium and Maria Tsenusa from Integrated Consulting Group. Hello, and thanks for being here.
Nice to see you again, both.
Hi, nice to see you.
So, just a very quick organizational moment from my side. So, our webinar is scheduled for half an hour. The format is a panel discussion, so we will be ready to answer all your questions even during the talk. So please type your questions into the chat. And we are recording this webinar, so right after we finish, you will receive the link to the video. So today we would like to discuss how to combine all new methodologies of working, which are agile, lean startup, and design thinking. And I'm passing the word at once to Maria and John. Maria, would you start?
Yes, thank you, Elena. Thank you. Hi again. Again from the car, like last week. This time going down south the country. So I hope I will not have any weird noises, but anyhow, we'll focus on the subject. So new ways of working. How did we come up with this? Well, it sounds very fancy and nobody knows what's behind it. We actually came up after discussing our experience with the clients and the fact that a lot of people are talking about design thinking, lean startup, agile. And I actually had a discussion with a client like 2 or 3 months ago, and they were trying to implement some projects, and they were thinking like, because they had separate sessions like training and workshops on agile design thinking and lean startup, and they were like, we want to do some projects, but I don't know, can we do design thinking and agile at the same time? They were all confused about how to combine these methodologies, and it became like, I don't know, like a quest for which team is more hip and happening with all the methodologies that they can use and so on and so forth. And then we realized that actually a lot of times these methodologies are presented separately, and it's just the connection is not made. Simple as that. So I don't know if I can go on this next slide. I will ask Olena maybe. I'm on the phone right now. Thank you. So what we try to put here on this slide is actually taking a step back on the why do we need such methodologies in the first place? Why everybody invented that, and why do they why do we know them so well, and we encounter them so many times? It actually starts from the challenge that all the companies have, and also the startups as well, in terms of launching new products and services. And I put here a bit of a small sketch on what would be the steps in which we would launch products, and where would design thinking and lean startup will kick in. So of course, whenever you have a great idea, we tend to go a lot in the solution space, and tend to frame our idea, which looks very nice, to make it work for the market. But we should actually start from the beginning and trying to understand the problem space way better, so that the solution that we are proposing has the right design. Not a few times, it's a lot of times we have seen a situation in which a great idea is failing, and without us understanding why. So this is why these methodologies as well, and this framework that we are proposing to you right now, is trying to set up the proper product for the proper customer. So then you start with market selection, in which you would understand the market around you, the regional, the local market, whatever that may be for your customers. and for your product, and then you would go into understanding what kind of clients are you servicing, what is the persona, let's say, what is the type of client. Try to sketch it, try to imagine it as a real life person. So then you would understand these clients the most, and then you would be able to propose this solution. And then here I know that also John has some stuff to add. There are some methodologies we can use. John, what do you think on the market selection?
This is really interesting, because one of the problems that we face is because you mentioned earlier on this idea that people worry about a particular methodology. Will it work with another particular methodology? Will Agile work with design thinking? Will they both work with lean, startup, whatever it is? One of the reasons why that happens is because we see problems in isolation, and we look for solutions which solve that isolated problem. So from an SME banking point of view, it might be something to do with lending or factoring or trade finance, whatever it is. And we respond to what we see as the problem between the bank and the SME, instead of doing exactly what you suggested, Maria, which is to say, let's have a look at the persona, let's have a look at the client first, and see not what particular problems do we have with that client, but actually, what does that client try to achieve? And what are the things holding that client back from achieving that? And what are the things that we can do something about? And almost without exception, there will be more than one solution, because the client will have more than one problem we can help them with. So we have to look at it from more than one angle. And much as I like the varying different Agile methodologies, and they're all very clever, they're all very successful in their application if done right, none of them is the whole solution to a client's challenges. So I think you're absolutely right. We have to start with the client, and the persona is the most, in a way, is the optimal way to do that, because that's the easiest way for us to start thinking into the mind of the client. And then we can start thinking not which is the solution here, but what bits of methodologies can I apply now in this context right now in this particular situation for that client.
Indeed. Actually, you just reminded me of a situation that I ran into a couple of years ago when we were trying to launch a product, and we arrogantly believed that the customer really understood all the details of our current accounts. So basically, we were trying to redesign the whole thing, and we were making just to make sure that we are competitive, just for us to realize that after doing a thorough research on the customer side, to realize that actually the customers, they don't, especially in this segment, and a very small segment, the main concern of the customer was actually to have an application up and running, and the current account to be as simple as possible to use. And yes, so the fees, but there are no so many differences between the banks, and actually they did not understand the product at all. And following a bit of research, and that in that time, we actually encountered that our initial approach was wrong. Would have made us spend a lot of money, but without the customer actually feeling some benefit. And this, especially from the banker side, this happens quite a lot, because we believe that our products are very well understood by everybody, and actually they're not really. And in a very small company segment, banking is basically the list of the problems of the customer. Sometimes they may access some lending, sometimes they may not. Just the bank is something on the back of their mind. They just want to focus on their core business and do a successful business. So yes, here there is also a matrix proposed by BCG. I know it's quite old, that matrix, but I really like it is the product metrics that is proposed by them. I didn't put it here. It's the market share that you have. The strategy for a product launching depends on the market share that you have and on the potential of the market, or the market growth that you have. John, what would you like to say about this one?
I think it's very, very important, because first of all, the BCG matrix is really good, because it doesn't just say, what's the market growth here? SMEs, growth market, fantastic, let's pile in here. Actually, it asks other questions. What's our market capability? What's the potential in this market for our particular line of products? Or indeed, what bit of the market are we talking about? Because market, SME banking, it's huge and it's very varied. So one of the most important things I think about that matrix is it requires us to apply some discipline to our assumption that SMEs are a growth market, therefore we should be there in them as a bank. The other thing that's quite important here, of course, is the point that you made about SMEs think about their customers. They have to, because they live close to break even in many cases, and certainly a lot closer to break even than most banks. And if they fail to be profitable for any length of time, they go out of business. So they have to think about customers and getting business from customers much more so than a bank. The bank actually, it sounds strange to say, no single bank has a monopoly in the marketplace. However, if from the point of view of the customer, all banks are the same, then banks as a group have a monopoly. And where anybody has a monopoly, they don't need to care about the customer, because the customer can't go anywhere else. So banks, the mindset of many banks, and this is where we see some really good examples of banks doing an SME banking job that's very effective, is where they start to behave differently from other banks. Because if you're same as every other bank, actually, it's just a monopoly approach. And the danger of that is that the bank forgets SMEs have somewhere else to go.
Well, now fintechs are a bit messing this and entering the market. So in some parts or segments of SME market, there is a competition with
and most interestingly, not only is there competition and it's very efficient and effective because it doesn't come with any legacy baggage or systems or anything like this, it also is targeting the most profitable bits of the market. So
exactly.
An SME banking operation needs to think very seriously. Actually, start with the customer. Start with the customer. Never mind the systems and the legacy and everything else. Maria.
Yeah. Yes. I just wanted to tell you that from SME's perspective, and also from the fintech's perspective, actually, as a newcomer, you are, if we were to think of that BCG matrix, you are in a market that's growing with little market share. What is your product strategy then? Because all the banks are coming locally via the corporate segment, and then they go low down the market. So then when you lower down the market your presence, then what is your strategy? It's growing, but what do you make differently? And this is a very simple matrix that is actually pointing out in a very structured and simple way that when you have no bit of a growing market, you're actually fighting a lot of fish there. So unless you're trying to be different, you'll have no excuse. If you adhere to the other banks, to the monopoly that you mentioned of the other banks, basically, you'll just grab something, but you will not have the star product. You'll just play along, you'll open another market segment, and then 3 years later, you wonder why your growth is very small, compared to the market.
I remember somebody saying to me once, if in business, if you can't win the game that you're in, play a different game.
Exactly.
And it makes perfect sense. So they differentiate from the rest of the market. And we see this in fintechs themselves, because it's not just that they deliver services online, because frankly, all banks can deliver services online, and many of them do already. It is that they have a new way of working. A completely new way of working, which is customer oriented. They started with the customer and then said, okay, how do we actually fill the gap? What's the unmet need? What's the job the customer needs to be done? All of those other good cliches that say, basically, I need to be able to sell something that people want.
Exactly. The problem that I'm trying to solve. The problem that I'm trying to solve is something that is relevant for the customer, is important, and has the unique combination of being important and the customer not being satisfied already by somebody else. That's actually going to the second plan in that slide. The problem that we are trying to solve, is this really an important problem, or is this something, a great idea we had and we want to put in practice? Because a lot of times we have this bias that we love our own ideas, but the problem that we are trying to solve, sometimes it might be that the customer is not satisfied. Whenever you have a bit of unsatisfaction from the customer's perspective, even if it's not important now, I think there is an opportunity that you can have for the future. And this is how actually, we love the idea of creating a need for a customer, of making your customer addicted to your products. I think actually it starts with a small grain of dissatisfaction from customer perspective. And once you smell that, you should try via these new ways of working, via this methodology with several iterations, you should try to satisfy that small need, because in time that customer will get it only from you, and will become important for them. Let's imagine the phone with the internet, or the tablet, or whatever. Was it important for us 20 years ago? Not really. We didn't know that there was a need there.
Yeah, interesting here. We think about new ways of working. Maybe one of the new ways of working that SME bankers may need to get used to is actually not owning the whole client. Because we know already corporate banking involves more often than not, a large corporation will have more than one bank.
Yeah.
Because they will have some very, very specialist functions that need scale, and not all banks will be able to provide that. So they might deal with banks in different geographies, banks in different specializations, whatever it is. When we get down to the medium-sized businesses, some of them will have more than one bank, because some of them will have a particular type of operation that requires that. Most SMEs have only one bank. And actually, if SME bankers are serious, it might be the case that instead of saying, if we can't get this client from that bank, then we won't bother with that client. It might be that actually, if the bank can disaggregate the things that it delivers, the products that it delivers, and say, as you just pointed out, there's a dissatisfaction here in one element of the way that these SMEs work. We can solve that challenge for them. We won't require them to move to us as a bank with everything, because actually they're not going to do that. It's not a big enough problem for them to change their bank, which, as we all know, is actually a very big problem. So actually deciding how much of an SME's business we can take as a bank and still be profitable is no longer going to be, the answer is no longer always going to be, we need all of that business. And fintechs, as I mentioned, and you pointed out, Elena, fintechs are taking the market because they don't want all of a company's business. They will take the best bits that they can deliver opportunely. So,
yes,
design thinking.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's the design thinking kicking in. It's like the basic question that you ask, especially when you're at the beginning with the launching or designing a product or a new service. Try to understand your customer, and of course, don't try to be everything. And this is another thing from the banks. We try to provide this and this and this and this, and then it's actually a lack of focus there, because this is the competitive advantage of fintech. No legacy. They just start from scratch and they focus on one thing, and all of a sudden they become, they are getting market share from various products of the bank. And you, as a bank, that you are offering, 10 mediocre products like everybody else, you start to have pieces of your product stolen, let's say, away by those fintechs, because you actually lacked this kind of focus.
And interestingly, it's not necessarily that the products themselves are mediocre. It is that there's not enough competitive advantage in the
Mm-hmm.
bank's product to compete with a fintech that says, wow, we've got a very affordable, immediate, easily accessible solution to this one problem. 2 clicks, maybe 3 clicks if it's a complicated problem, and then you've solved it. If you go to your bank, you need 5 discussions, and then it goes to a credit committee, and then this, and then this, and this. So if banks are able, as I say, to think about disaggregating the services they provide for SMEs, they may discover actually that they have the capital and the network to have a competitive advantage even against the fintechs. The challenge is the banks have a legacy of structures and systems and everything else that doesn't allow them to be as nimble as the fintechs. So it's not easy to disaggregate. We are I'm talking too much because you've got another slide, I think, Maria, that you wanted to show.
No, I'm fine. I can stay a bit on this one because I also wanted to share a bit of a story again about launching a product. And we as a bank being a bit, believing that we know everything about the customer, but sometimes forgetting to ask the customer itself about why do they actually need this product, how do they use it, what is the context. And this time I want to talk about a bit the lean startup, in which it's a bit different than the design thinking, which goes more with the empathy towards the client. Lean startup goes more with trying to understand what are the hypotheses behind our belief that the solution is good, and trying to test and measure as much as possible, and to be objective in everything else. So the story that I want to share was actually me having a board approval and budget and everything for the next quarter, so in 3 months from now, to start working on a great idea that I had. And then we had this, I'm joking, of course, with a bit of a sense of humor here, and we had this innovation team that was quite new, and it was fashionable that you would test your products with this innovation team. And then we said, yes, let's be one of the first because we are open. And then I got this very simple question. I don't remember exactly which guy from the team, but I remember the discussion in which they asked, okay, so if you believe your solution is that good, and this is the lean startup kicking in, if we would ask from our portfolio, I don't know, 20, 30, 100 customers, how many of them would they take it? And then here you have like 2 approach. You have the approach of minimum case scenario. So what is the minimum amount of customers that I need for them to buy my product, so then I can start making profits. And then you have, of course, the arrogant banker approach. I'm sorry to say this, but it's about me. I'm not talking about anything else, anybody else. And I simply said, if 7 out of 10 don't take it, I was so confident in the product. If 7 out of 10 don't take it, then we don't do it. Bam. So 2 months later, what do you think? They didn't take it. They didn't take it enough to make the business case. So that was a great lesson for me. And that was actually the moment I started to understand that there is something behind these things, and it's everybody's talking about customer is at the core of our business. How many times do we actually do it? And in terms of SMEs, especially, what do you have in a bank? You have a centralized department who does the strategy, the products, the processes, because you need some sort of design that is central. You cannot have, with every branch something different. So you need a central approach. You cannot afford to have the corporate approach for each SMEs. Yes. And then what do you have with the central team? You will have people that barely meet the client in the end. And this is the disconnect that we are doing as a banker, and it's a pity. It's a pity.
It is, and the greatest danger, I think, here is actually a good idea. Because when we have a good idea and we know it's a good idea, like you, I remember I had a conversation with a bank chief exec once about an SME banking issue, and my response when questioned about whether or not it would actually be profitable, my response was, why wouldn't they buy this? well, actually, why wouldn't I buy it? I could think of lots of reasons why I would want to buy it and stuff like that. Actually, it was a good idea, but it was a good idea for me. It wasn't necessarily a good idea for the 5 million SMEs in the UK or the however many 100 million SMEs in the EU. We do need actually to test our good ideas against the people from whom we want money. Actually,
Exactly.
really.
Exactly. Because we design for them. We don't design for us to have great ideas and make us feel good about each other. We design for them if we want them to buy. And this is how we go to the final slide. When you have an idea, you want to scale it up. And the final slide is actually saying, what is what when you use what? This is actually Staceys decision matrix. This guy is still alive. He's working with a university and has elaborated a decision matrix for uncertainty, which was reframed, and I put it in a way so that we can have all this design thinking, lean startup, agile, waterfall, whatever, all these names to have it on the same slide. And what I want to draw attention here, I think we should use methodologies when they are appropriate and when they can help us achieve something better if we weren't using those particular methodology. We should not use something just for the sake of it because, I don't know, it's the group is telling us or whatever, how it works. And here I put also waterfall because waterfall is good, is relevant. We should not ditch it. Why do we have agile? Agile we have because of high degree of uncertainty, wherever that is. Waterfall is whenever you have something that is stable, simple as that. So waterfall and agile is actually ways of organizing your projects in your quest to deliver services to the market. But you can work agile, yes, you can work agile without delivering a product to the market. You can work agile as a way of organizing your activities as a team. As I said in one of the previous webinars, agile can be like a lifestyle. Yes, you don't need to launch products to work agile. So that would be the main differences between agile, design thinking, and lean startup. Design thinking and lean startup are product methodologies by which you want to understand how can you deliver the best solution to the customer that you are trying to serve, while agile is organizing your activity. And in this matrix, I put here technological uncertainty on the horizontal axis and the degree of market uncertainty on the vertical axis. And you can see that whenever you have low degree of uncertainty, you should use waterfall, as simple as that. You should not, and an example for that in a bank would be, for example, trying to implement some regulatory framework, which is very clear, is very defined. You know the deadline, you know the characteristics. So basically, there's nothing to negotiate. If you want to make it agile, fine, whatever. Actually, at the end of the day, making it agile or delivering it waterfall, it's the same. It has no benefits. You have no benefits of working agile other than, I don't know, having a better team spirit or mixing up with more people, more departments. But waterfall is just as good. Once you start to have some degree of uncertainty, you should use the advice was to use agile methodology as a way of organizing your work. But now the question is, where would you have this uncertainty? If you have the uncertainty in the market, in the part of the market, so you don't exactly know the market, you don't understand, you still did not find that combination, that need of the customer that will make them their eyes shine for your product, then you should use design thinking methodology as a way of empathizing and understanding your customer better, and therefore designing the solution to the problem that they have, understanding better the problem. And actually, it happens quite a lot that you believe the customer has a problem, and once investigating with them, you end up realizing that actually it was a different problem and your solution would have not addressed the core issue. So design thinking, the way you can organize your design thinking project can be agile, yes. And once you know the market, but you do not know the technology that you should use, how to design your product, how to make it better, this is how the lean startup kicks in. the hypothesis, testing, building, measuring, and finding the right MVP and finding the solution to scale it. So this is an approach that you can use, very simple one, simplified. Of course, the methodologies, there's more to those methodologies than there is in this graph, but it's just I found out that sometimes it helps people clearing up their mind, when to use what, whatever, where am I, why do I use these things? What do you think about this one?
Uh,
John?
I think it's great. It's very simple. The satisfying the market uncertainty is actually answering the question: what do we need to do to help the customer? Okay, so that will get design thinking will tell us what. Lean startup, actually, we know what, but we don't know how. Lean startup will enable us to deliver the how. So we already know the why because we've researched what the customer need is and the job to be done, stuff like that. So we need a what and a how. And actually, the simplicity of this slide, of this matrix, is what I really like about it. And also the fact that actually it does start with waterfall. Where there's predictability, no reason why not. So where there's uncertainty, both those two axes, we know which approach we should take to favor either one. And then there's one in the middle, of course.
Which one?
The one that is further out. The one starts with A.
Yes. Yes, Elena, please.
Yes, no, I just wanted to say that this is a real, I think a main message and a real summary for today's episode, because this is absolutely fantastic for me, because this is really now me personally I have a clear picture when and what should be used. So this is perfect. This is just perfect. So I think we will publish it as a real summary of today's episode. What do you think?
Yeah,
okay.
Definitely. I also think one of the most important things that you said, actually, Maria, was we're trying to achieve something better. We're not just doing this because somebody pays us to keep coming up with new stuff. Actually, the horrible word additionality, which is basically we want to do something which is additional to what's already being done, something better, as you rightly said. We start with the customer. We then think about what's the problem the customer has or what's the job that they want to have done. Then we think about what the solutions might be. And the solution, and this is what I like about that chart, the solution is always dependent upon the context. Is it market uncertainty? Is it technological or operational uncertainty? The context will always be the driver of whichever solutions we take or we approach first. And that includes cherry picking from various things. I remember somebody said to me once, we want to be the most efficient manufacturers in a manufacturing company. We want to be the most efficient manufacturers of asbestos in the world. And I said, that's a very, ambitious statement. How useful is it if it's illegal everywhere? Because there's no point in being the world's most efficient manufacturer of asbestos if you can't sell it to anybody. The context is really, really important. And I think this chart gives us very clearly the context in which design thinking or lean startup or indeed agility can be applied effectively.
Okay.
And what do you think if the market changes very fast, let's say very quick, how fast companies today, maybe from your observation, from your practice, let's say, can switch from one methodology to another using taking this chart into the account?
I think it depends quite a lot where you are on the life cycle of your product. If you are at the very, very, very beginning with a very new idea, or if you already have a product in the market and you're trying to pivot your strategy or not. I think if you're at the beginning, and also it depends how much time you have against the competition. So if you are at the beginning with a product, just scratching the surface, My recommendation would be towards design thinking, because you need to understand the market before you're trying to propose anything to it. However, design thinking tends to be on a longer time frame, usually. It does not mean on the design thinking you don't need to do statistical relevant surveys, so like interviewing hundreds of customers or meeting them. You'll get that feel of the customer after organizing several meetings with customers, but it tends to take quite longer than lean startup. That was my experience, at least. Lean startup is basically you start with something. Before starting, you say, hey, if 5 out of 10 customers that walk on this street go inside, take my product, then it means it's validated and I will start building on it. If there's only 3 after 1 week, then it's crap. I will start something else. So, and it's faster. That's my experience with design with lean startup. It depends on where you are. It's a context again. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I think it is context, and I think that every methodology, and this is the challenge, methodologies are developed as a solution to a problem. Every methodology is a trap if we follow it rigidly. It's like having only one route to a destination or only one tool in a toolbox. And the context, this is where the context becomes important. If we have 4 methodologies, we have Agile and Design Thinking and Lean Startup and Waterfall, the context will tell us which one is appropriate. If we say Waterfall, that's the best, or Agile, that's the best, then if the context changes, we are left wrong-footed. And to answer your question directly, Elena, being attached to a methodology is the opposite of being agile. Even if that methodology is agile, because we have to be mentally agile enough to be able to say, this isn't working. The context has changed. This is what we mean by a paradigm shift. You know, we need to look at things in a different way.
Yes, cool.
Exactly. And that's why
exactly.
And that's why when customers come, I had a customer and they were saying, we want to do this project and we want to do a lean startup on it. I'm always like, what is your purpose? Your purpose is to test the methodology, or do you actually want to launch something?
Mm-hmm.
So don't be a slave to the methodology. Exactly. Very well said.
What a great way to finish a session on new ways of working. Don't be a slave to the methodology.
Yes. And actually, yes, this will be a motto and the summary of today's episode. So thank you, as usual, for your contribution, Marie and John. Thank you for the attendees, and see you next Monday, 11 a.m. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.